Thank you, Rob. It's good to see everyone here, Excellencies, Your Royal Highness, colleagues. It's great to be in a position to finally kickstart what we've been dreaming of for a few years already. On the back of many UN resolutions, I'm thinking of UNEA 3. Please, I'd like the panel to join me on the stage while I'm doing some quick opening remarks.
In particular order?
No, and
I'll fill in from the far end.
Yeah, please. Let's just keep it simple and conversational. So it's a delight to have both a government perspective here on this panel, private sector, of course, and to look at the what, the how. We've heard of the why. We know why we're doing this. We know why we're here. So let's get into how we're going to actually do this. And maybe I will try and find a microphone so I can sit down and join the panel. Thank you, sir. And it's working. Hello. Well, why don't we go in that order then?
All right.
Kristin, I was just introducing everyone and then we'll get into the discussion. So Kristin Hughes, you're the director of the Global Plastics Action Partnership at the World Economic Forum.
Yes, indeed. Thank you.
Michael Goltzman, you're the head of public policy and public affairs for the Coca-Cola Company.
Yes, great to be here.
Thank you for coming. Juliet Kabera, the director of the Rwanda Waste Management and Ecological Services.
No.
I'll let you correct me then.
Yes. The Director General, Mike? Hi. Yeah. The Director General of Rwanda Environment Management Authority.
Yes. That's exactly what I said, no? And finally, Rob Cameron. So you're the head of public affairs and ESG engagement at Nestlé.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Joss. And yeah, nice to be here.
So, I mean, I won't go over the main points of the UNEA Treaty, which have been exposed very well by Inger and others. One thing that struck me, though, is that when Norway got the resolution on marine litter and plastic adopted at UNEA 3 a few years ago already, it was a different context. And what we've heard today is that circular economy is part of the solution. The important thing to acknowledge as well is that the landscape has changed. And since then, we've had an innovative, sustainable consumption and production pathway resolution adopted at UNEA 4, highlighting the importance of the circular economy, a resolution on circular economy itself at UNEA 5. So the landscape is much more conducive. And Juliet, I'll turn to you first of all, because Rwanda has been at the forefront of these questions for a few years already, looking at plastic pollution, acting nationally. And I'll just ask you, what elements of the UNEA resolutions are the most important for your country from a government perspective?
Yeah, thank you, Joss. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's a pleasure for me to be here. And the question is a bit tricky because the entire resolution is really all elements are very exciting, all interesting. But a few standouts, and I'll mention three. Number one is the objectives. I love the objectives of the resolution. I'm already talking about the treaty like we have it, but I think we need to think that way. Yeah, so the objective of ending plastic pollution in all compartments of the environment is just great for us to even start thinking about that way. We're not looking at pollution in just the marine. We are looking at ending pollution in all environments, terrestrial. To be frank, it wouldn't be so close to us in Rwanda. We are a landlocked country. We don't have direct access to the sea or ocean, but we know that we contribute to whatever is ending up in the ocean and the seas. So tackling pollution right there upstream is very important, and this is already spelled out in the draft resolution. And the scope, therefore, is wide. I love the opening statement that a number of the business operators just laid out a few minutes ago. We're looking at, single-use plastics, packaging materials, plastics used in fishing gears, all that. It's so vast. And hopefully we are going to have, different teams working on the details of all that and therefore come up with specific management plans, because I think we cannot have the same approach to manage all these different types of plastics. So that's objective and scope. I also like the fact that we are looking at it from a life cycle approach. We are looking at checking the production of the product leakage from the production process of producing the polymers. We're looking at checking the leakage from the level of designs of the different products. And indeed, we are looking at the waste that is already in the environment. So the life cycle approach is just perfect. We've all talked about this being a symptom of a disease in the system. So checking the entire system is really, really a great element for us in Rwanda. And then the implementation, I think we are calling for clear implementation of this legal binding treaty when we have it. It's one thing to have a legal instrument, it's another to have it implementable, enforceable. So we are looking for one that can really do that. And we have a big brother, we have a big sister, the Montreal Protocol, which we are really trying to look at. All these are clearly outlined. One of the elements that really need to be put in place is a financing instrument, funding modality of implementing this instrument or treaty when it's out. And we are really biased towards a dedicated funding mechanism, multilateral in nature. I think that would really expedite the implementation. So I did promise to talk about 3, and those are the ones that are very much of interest for us in Rwanda. Thank you.
No, that's really good. Thank you, because we're really getting into the actual nitty-gritty and some of the concrete outcomes that you would like to see. I'm turning to you, Kristin, because the World Economic Forum, of course, represents a wide number of businesses who have been in this discussion for a while, and we've done some work together. Basically, how does the WEF sees itself in this discussion, and how is it mobilizing the members to bring to the discussion their perspective and what they would like to see?
Thank you for that, and also thank you to everyone who's here. It's really remarkable to hear some of the comments that were made this morning. And I would think about, from the World Economic Forum's perspective, we believe in that multi-stakeholder approach to addressing some of the big issues of the day, and this is no different to that. So really mobilizing those efforts from governments, as you heard this morning, some very key government representatives, but then also the public sector. So how do we ensure that both of those voices are heard and are represented at the table? We would also promote I think Inga also mentioned this, but the voice of the informal sector to really help us to transition to a circular economy. And so it's really, really important that we not just convene, but that we gather insights. And so something that the forum does quite regularly is this deep analysis. And we at the Global Plastic Action Partnership have been working with Systemic to deliver national-based analyses, and then from that, delivering and building roadmaps that help these governments then to implement change. And what's, again, what I think is very ambitious when we think about 2 years plus that we're looking to implement a global treaty. So it's really exciting, but Espen continues to tell me that 2 years is not very long. So we really have our work cut out for us, and we're looking forward to continuing the dialogue that you've kicked off today. So congratulations, and hopefully we can carry this on through November, the World Circular Economy Forum in Rwanda, and of course at the annual meeting in Davos.
Thanks, Kristin. Actually, well, let's put our private sector representatives on the spot right here and say, rather than asking you what you want to see, I'd like to start by what you have done. What are the most impactful things that you have done within your own companies in order to reduce your plastic impact? I'll start by you, Michael.
Well, first, I just want to say thank you to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and World Wildlife Fund for convening us all here today. We are really proud to be part of the Business Coalition pushing for a treaty and an ambitious treaty. And that's based in our overall strategy of World Without Waste that's founded in the idea of a circular economy for all of our packaging materials, because that is going to allow us to use less virgin material, less energy, and help us transition to that lower carbon world. For us, really our strategy is based on design, so moving to all recyclable packaging by 2025, aligned with the EMF global commitment, around more increased use of recycled content, around collection, and around partnership. And you know, the Pew study a couple of years ago sort of said, there's really not one silver bullet. There's a whole bunch of actions that we need to bring together. But if I was going to highlight one today, it would really be around our new reuse goal to actually have 25% of our global volume in refillable or dispensed packaging that uses a reusable container by 2030. This is about, you know, increasing and building on our already substantial base of 40 markets around the world that have today 25% of their volume in reusable packaging. So that means it's either a plastic or a glass bottle that gets washed and reused, or it is dispensed solutions with a reusable package. So for us, that's really the basis of where we're now starting and building on, working towards, you know, achieving those goals by 2025 and 2030.
Thanks very much. Rob, I'll let you follow on from that.
Yeah, thank you. I'll echo the thanks, of course, to EMF and WWF for pulling us all together like this. There's a British civil servant who once said, there is no problem so complex that it cannot be fixed by getting the right people in the room and asking the right question. And looking around the room, we've got the right people in the room, and I think we're asking the right questions. So I'd like to think we'll look back on this as being a very auspicious day in the future. From our point of view at Nestle, we're really clear. We have a vision. It's simple. None of our packaging ends up as landfill or litter. Simple. That's what we're working towards. And we're working towards it every single day. Visions are all very well, but they're a bit of they're only a dream. It can become a nightmare unless you turn it into action. So we've got very clear 2025 goals around recycling and recyclability. We need easier words, actually. That's what we need. That all of our packaging is reusable or recyclable by 2025, to reduce our use of virgin plastic by a third. And also, you know, we're concentrating on systems as well. So when we think about it, it's, again, make it simple. It's less packaging, and better systems. When it comes to less packaging, there it starts with some simple things like lightweighting, reducing headspace. There's so much that can be achieved when you think about reducing headspace in a bottle. You know, it doesn't seem like a lot on that bottle, but at the scale that we're working at, you guys are working at, that adds up to an awful lot of plastic in the end. Right? So the simple things like that we can do, we have done, and are making a difference. We're also focused on reuse and refill as well. We have some 30 pilots running around the world right now to try and scale up on reuse and refill, but there is the word, scale up. Pilots are great, we're good at pilots, we're really good at pilots. We're really grappling with, and then how do you go to scale? We're all grappling with that. And the reason why we're grappling with it is because it's really tricky with systems, and you know, there isn't the consistency across the board that we need to really get reuse and refill up and running. We've got retailers here, and the competition for retail space is so competitive, it's so tight. So there has to be some universal system, and we need to help consumers to really want to embrace it as well. So we're working on reuse and refill. So that's the less agenda. On the better agenda, one of the things that we did, which actually doesn't get talked about very much, but I think in a sense it's a scale of, it highlights the scale of our determination. When we looked around to try and find out, okay, so who's doing what on materials? Yeah, there's a whole bunch of people working on materials science around the world. Yeah, for sure. But they're not necessarily thinking about it through the lens of what we need for our packaging. So we set up the Nestle Institute of Packaging Sciences. We couldn't find the institute we wanted, so we made our own. There's 50 scientists that spend every day in Lausanne at our research centre doing nothing but material science and related studies on how we're going to make better materials along the way. And they're already having some great success. So for example, you all know the story about plastic straws. I mean, do we really need plastic straws? Well, yeah, until you can find an alternative. Well, we have found the alternative. It's paper straws. And in the space of 2 or 3 years, we managed to get that from 4.7 billion paper straws, none. We've eliminated paper straws, eliminated plastic straws and paperized them. They're paperized. That paperization, where the paper's coming from sustainable sources, just makes a huge difference. So we're making progress there. On systems, active in EPR, active in DRS schemes around the world, we want to see better systems. One add that I'd make is that we need this level playing field. Now, you've heard it already. I always think that these sorts of events, there's certain things that come up again and again, right? It's a journey. Yep, heard that one. Yep, we can't do it alone. Yep, got that one. And the level playing field. Yep, check. Well, I'm going to add an adjective for you, okay? Well, what we want is a high level playing field. We need a high level playing field. That's what we need to get to, and that's what this treaty can help us with.
That's great. Thank you, Rob. And can I add another one? I think we need to make the economics work as well, which is another way to say high-level playing field.
Well, look, just on that, on the economics, the economics don't work. You heard it earlier on. I mean, it is absolutely insane that recycled content is more expensive than virgin polymers, right? So, and especially that's true when it comes to food-grade recycled plastic. It isn't there. So we put aside, we said, publicly, and we've been doing it behind the scenes as well, we will put our money where our mouth is. And we said there's up to 1.5 billion Swiss francs available for premiums to try and stimulate the market. And it's a really tough road to hoe. We've made some progress, yes, but not at the scale that we would have thought. And the economics of it simply aren't working. So as long as it's cheaper to use virgin plastics, that's what's going to end up happening. And we want to try and break that cycle.
Yeah, not only that, but in the investment in collection mechanisms, harmonization, etc. And I'll bring you in, Juliet, at this point, because you, as a national government authority, you are dealt some cards, and you have to deal with what's on the market. And by the way, I'll just also give you all a license to bounce off each other, metaphorically, of course, and not wait for me to ask questions, because consider you're in the discussion here. I'm not passing the baton, as it were. So yes, on that notion of interacting with the private sector and knowing what it is exactly that you can shift in the short term in order to get the ball rolling and to get to scale. How are you finding this, and what are your expectations for the INCs and the process that we're starting?
Yes, thank you so much. Great insights from my colleagues, the panelists. Yeah, first of all, having the diversity we have in the room, the businesses, the government, really is a source of hope that we can solve the problem that we have, the problem of having the plastics in the environment. And from a practical perspective at home, where we have banned the use of, first of all, plastic carry bags since 2008. And 3 years back, we now stepped up the ban to end the use of single-use plastics, starting with what we call the non-so-essential items like straws. We believe we can drink anything without a straw. But by pushing that ban, then we started getting the paper straws. I don't know so much about the material behind that, the science behind that, but at least I see paper straws on the market now. It wasn't the case 2-3 years ago. Yeah, so that said, we believe that if we have a legal instrument which is really binding, not voluntary, and we are up to the task of making sure that we are keeping each other accountable to be able to, implement this treaty, then these innovations are going to be, we are incentivizing in a way the researchers, the industries, to now bring out the alternatives that we need. They're still expensive, very not so attractive for the industries to purchase. They're also few, and again, I believe that it's because the demand is still low. With the instrument, the demand should raise, and then we should have these alternatives affordable. Right now, they're not affordable, and simply coming in from a perspective of us being the regulatory authority and we are just enforcing the law, sometimes it doesn't feel realistic. And that's why this really makes sense, because now you're talking to the people who are going to help you solve the problem, and so you enforce the law, enforce the standards, but you also be able to tell people the alternatives are available. You can actually shift because you now know that is possible. The networks around this is incredible. We're supposed to learn from each other, from different countries, what has worked from your side, what has not worked. But by and large, the more you enforce, the more you encourage researchers and producers to bring the alternatives to the market.
These are great. Yeah, well, I was going to bring you in from the perspective of the Global Action, Plastic Action Partnerships. There are certainly things that you've seen that could help that process, right?
Yes, actually, I wanted to build on that because when we think about the treaty, first of all, it's very important that we look at the entire value chain and that every sector and every player is brought in. And I think what we're hearing here, we've got two users of plastic, but if they also both Coca-Cola and Nestle, we heard Alan Jope as well, have very high ambitious targets to utilize recycled plastic, but it's actually not available. And you can talk to key recyclers like those in the room, like Gemini, who aren't able to get the supply. So you actually have the demand for the recycled content, but we're not yet seeing the right level of sorting and collection that then will lead to these companies being able to reach their targets. And of course, with your global commitment, you are setting very ambitious targets. So how do you ensure that every player along the value chain is then engaged to be able to support those who are trying to be super ambitious in this effort?
Any reactions from either you, Michael, or Rob?
I think maybe where I would start is just sort of recognizing that we are at a very historic moment where the private sector is here at the table at the beginning of the process. And if we sort of look back at some of the great examples that Inger Anderson raised this morning, there are great examples of where we succeeded, but we didn't always start that way, and maybe we slowed ourselves down by not doing that. So I'm very hopeful in that sense because this is where we're starting, and we're all going to have to roll up our sleeves and contribute. What Rob said about leveling the playing field is absolutely true because many of the big brands that are here today, we are joining forces supporting EPR or DRS or other types of systems, but everyone who is producing in markets does not have to participate in those, and this is going to help us with a regulatory framework that will then oblige all of the producers to join in those efforts. And that's a hard thing for us, and it also starts with where the Ellen MacArthur Foundation started. You can't create circularity if you're not using recyclable materials. So that has to be the place that we start, and hopefully part of where we embed that in the treaty process. And certainly for us, and as Rob and many of the other brands know, right, we want to use more recycled content in food and beverage grade packaging around the world. Every country has not set a standard for that, so you cannot actually legally use that. Many countries have moved. Thailand, Bahrain, the Gulf countries, a number, Bangladesh, others, have set standards basing off what Europe, the US, Japan, Australia, many others have already done. So there is a process for governments to play in actually creating that framework to allow us to really enable that circularity and accelerate what we're doing already.
Rob?
Well, I think one of the things that we can bring in this very intense period that we're going into, I mean, this is not a long negotiating period, and I think what Michael says about business being there at the beginning is important because, when there's a unity of business voice, when big companies are sort of speaking with one voice, companies that actually spend most of their time competing with each other are actually speaking with one voice. That creates a space that perhaps wasn't there previously, so that's really important. Unity of voice. I think regularity, consistency of voice as well. This is not the only event that takes place. We've got Climate Week this week. Many of you in the room will probably be in Egypt. And then after that, some of you are going to be in Montreal for a biodiversity COP. We have an opportunity to keep this conversation alive and to keep reminding people that the bar must be set high, that we want a high bar. So us keeping the conversation alive, us creating the space where negotiators feel that they can have some confidence that they're not about to do something that business doesn't like. No, quite the opposite, in fact. We need to, as Inger has asked of us, we need to really encourage the negotiators to go at it and go at it with real ambition, because we will support that, and they need to know that we would support that.
I think it's a really important point, because what we're talking about today is not minimizing the negative effects of the current system, it's to create a virtuous one. And so that means, of course, polymer science, retail model, business models, legislation, absolutely everything's on the table. So at the moment, of course, it's starting the negotiations, but there are also national plans and measures coming into force. France had one. A lot of countries have measures on plastics. How do we make sure they are still incentivized to carry on with ambitious policy whilst waiting for the outcome of the treaty, which might go to a certain extent, not necessarily against, but might slow down their processes as well? Chris?
I'll take that, thank you. Because part of our approach to the Global Plastic Action Partnership is supporting governments to first run a baseline assessment. So you understand actually where the problems exist, and then we develop action roadmaps that help governments to implement the right kind of regulatory policies and frameworks that then can really help us to shift that needle. In addition, we're looking at the right financing. I think Juliet mentioned it as well. It's really important to understand what's needed fundamentally from a finance perspective to help some of these countries to shift to a more circular approach with plastics. And then finally, I would say, and I've heard little tinkerings of this this morning, but it's really key that we also look at new innovations, technology support, policies that can engage, and I think those baseline enablers can help to elevate this conversation. But again, I cannot stress enough that the more ambitious we can be, but also looking at that entire value chain. I think Alan said it, we can't be fragmented. It can't just be regional by region, but really if we look at these national plans, and countries can start to enable those plans now, even before we have a treaty. So we're available, we're excited. We had Ecuador join our partnership on Monday, so they'll be we'll be supporting them in this approach. So I think we have some of the tools, and we're not the only one. UNEP have a great tool, World Bank, Pew. So there's loads of different ways that the governments can actually get support in understanding what the situation is, what's the issue, and then we can help them with those national action plans as well.
And also contextualize it, because it can't be fragmented, it can't be siloed, and it can't be a single plastics issue either. I mean, plastics started off as a marine pollution issue. You see a plastic bag, you think that's going to end up in the sea. It's got a CO2 footprint as well. It's a climate issue, it's a biodiversity issue as well. So how do we make sure that we put all of these discussions at the heart of the triple planetary crisis? And Juliet, maybe I'll turn to you on that one, because you Rwanda co-leads together with Norway, the High Ambition Coalition, so the governmental side of the equation here. So how do you see that integration between what the coalition can bring in terms of policy recommendations and advice, and how it's going to be received? And also, of course, the High Ambition Coalition is a subset of those governments negotiating, and let's not be naive, it's not going to be an easy discussion, right?
It's going to be hard, but we are here to do hard things. And just to let you know that the Minister of Norway is in the room, you might want to pass the question to him.
He is speaking, he'll have plenty of time to respond.
Yeah, but I really wanted to jump on Rob's idea of, is it an idea? He has pointed out that the private sector is here in the beginning, starting with us. We have not started the very first INC negotiations. This is starting later this year. And there is a lot of confidence that the negotiators will go into those negotiating rooms with, knowing that the people who are supposed to generate the solutions are here with us. We have the data. We are coming up with the baselines. There is so much that is going to help, that is going to help during the negotiations to come up with the type of treaty that we want to have to end up with. Sometimes it's so frustrating when you're in a negotiating room and there are areas that you don't have actual information, data on, and you see people step out, I'm consulting. And behind the consultation is because I'm not so sure this is the path I want to take. So by having the right people in the room, the right people on the journey, that will make the negotiations much easier. It's hard, that's for a fact. It's a wide subject, knowing how to cut it down so we don't have we don't end up with everything and nothing really so clear, and yet we also don't want to repeat the same thing of fragmenting. I see a tendency of us, the government people, trying to point at where this is found. We already have this in Basel Convention. We already have this in, this treaty is coming, so we have just one instrument, one treaty that is going to help in regulating this, so we don't have to respond to so many, many treaties globally. So the High Ambition Coalition, therefore, comes in after the passing of the resolution. Norway and the Rwanda government thought of how we can keep the conversation going. I think this is critical that we keep the conversation going so we don't all go home and get lost in the daily business and forget the energy we had in the room in Nairobi. So that's how the High Ambition Coalition came about. How do we make sure that these key questions that we might not be on the same level at globally, how do we condense them? How do we create webinars for people to keep following? How do we even commission studies? Honorable Minister, I hope I'm not preempting anything yet. Yes, how do we commission studies that will give us the right information, probably which will serve as reference documents. And at this point, I want to acknowledge the very good work that so many of us here have already done, the Ellen MacArthur, WWF. I'm hesitant to keep mentioning the names because I know, so many publications have been made and we have been referring to this year in, year out, so to inform decisions. So this kind of information is what the High Ambition Coalition will be dealing with, putting it together in different formats. So countries and negotiators already have this even before we start the negotiations. And then we'll, of course, leverage the different international forums like the COP in Egypt and so many areas where ministerial level gatherings will be taking place. I learned from State Secretary Medina that this is the same thing that the US government is thinking about, to have at least annual events where we bring together the businesses and all actors, all players to, again, talk about this. The more we talk about the issue, the problem, I believe the solutions are also coming out of us. And 2 years is not so much time. We need to use every day constructively. Thank you.
Yeah. Go for it, Michael.
I just wanted to add one thing because I don't think we should let people leave the room to think that there aren't business opportunities here. Many of the companies, along with Nestle, and I saw a colleague from PepsiCo here as well, were members of a group called Circulate Capital. Has raised more than $100 million that is investing in startups that are actually then delivering the recycled content we need in parts of the world where the biggest challenges are, where those industries don't exist yet. So there are business opportunities out there to grow this, and as you've heard, many of the brands have big goals out there and need more recycled content, and all of us are paying the premiums that are out there today, absolutely paying those premiums to move the ball forward towards our goals. So there is an economy that is going to work here, and we're just priming the pump to get it going, but there certainly are more opportunities to be had for those entrepreneurs, and certainly Gemini knows that and has been doing it for a long time.
And it will only work if it's tackled as a global material flow issue. So at the WTO level, all of these multilateral forums. I'll now have...
Can I make one comment after this?
Maybe after this, if that's all right, because I've promised the panel to give them each 1 minute for a closing statement and really the message that they would like the audience to leave the room with. So, Kristin.
Oh, 1 minute. Okay, I'll try to be even quicker than that.
You can be quicker than that. It's 1 minute max.
No, There you go. But I feel like I'm repeating myself, but I really think it's important that we look at upstream, downstream, very inclusive approach to this. There are policy enablers that we can create beyond just the treaty. We've got to look at trade barriers, finance barriers, innovation, technology. I think there's a full package that's really, really key. And I think with the work that WWF are undertaking, Ellen MacArthur, with this High Ambition Coalition and all of the business players in the room, but also with the government, is absolutely critical. So you get that public-private multi-stakeholder collaboration towards an actual proper, ambitious, and hopefully accountable treaty.
Which also means that we need to develop the intelligence to feed those discussions. Michael.
I just would maybe build what I started with. I do think it's a historic moment that all of the stakeholders are around the table at the beginning before even the negotiation starts. And so, look, we look forward to being constructive contributors and know that there is a long and difficult process to go through for the governments. But I think that's exciting and very hopeful. I do feel like this is something we can actually tackle, right? We know a lot of what needs to be done, and we just need to put the policies, programs, and partnerships in place to make it happen.
Thank you. Juliet?
Thank you. If we are moving from point A to point B, point A being the pollution that we have right now, point B being the 2040, when we aim to end plastic pollution in the environment, having the private sector with us would mean we are not going to walk. We are going to use a bus. And the bus will be electrical. Yeah, so yes. And having an ambitious private sector with us, the high-level playing field would mean that we're actually going to take a flight. So we are going to reach there first. Thank you.
Thank you. Rob?
Well, look, the plastics waste crisis is often described as a wicked problem, and I think it fulfills all of the criteria of a wicked problem, and sometimes you just need a simple way to come at it. We're all here, most of us have traveled to get here. Imagine when you got home, you went upstairs and discovered you left the bathroom tap running. The bathroom's flooded. What is the first thing that you do? Do you get towels out and start mopping up the water? Do you start thinking of all the things you could reuse your water with? You know, you could water the garden with it. You could start thinking of all the things you could do with that water. Or do you turn off the tap? That's the first thing you do. You turn the tap off. Our job is to find every means we can. It isn't as simple as just turning a tap. I know that. But there are means, mostly economic, but there are means to turn the tap off. That must be part of this treaty, and we need it within 2 years.
Thanks. That's a very good note to end on. Please join me for a round of applause for our panelists.